But thank you for choosing this location, and the Edgecombe County Veterans Museum, Military Veterans Museum, and we're glad you're here, and we hope you take a few minutes and after the program maybe and look around on that wall of, I call it wall of honor, with the portraits and the photos here, and there's like 900 plus on there, and they're all either from Edgecombe County or right around Edgecombe County, or they're people who moved in Edgecombe County and live most of their life here. They don't have, they could be from anywhere if they come here. I don't know what the criteria for how long they have to live here to get up on the wall, but there's some on there that have been here, I know have been here 20, 30 years, but there's some less too. And if there are any of you out here who are veterans, and that includes even the, which I'm a part of, the National Guard, you got the Air National Guard, you got the Army National Guard, you got the Coast Guard. And the 6x8 program we call it, 6 months active and 8 years reserve, active and inactive. So that includes, we're considered veterans too, even though we opted out of the Vietnam conflict by doing that. Some of us did. But anyway, if you know of anyone that's a veteran in this area, that they don't have their picture up there, please try to encourage them to come by and get something up on the wall. And we still have some room. And the last time we had this program, we didn't have as many conflicts, and we had a lot more people here. So I thought I was going to be able to say we also own the Colonial Theater building up here, which is being renovated and restored. And we hope that we will have programs like this and events like this over there as soon as we get it ready. We're about, I want to say we're probably halfway there, halfway finished, not halfway. So we're still looking for money, and if you know anyone that has grant application experience or fundraising experience, we could certainly use your volunteer help, and it would certainly be appreciated. So I guess at this point, I just want to thank you again for being here, and I'm going to turn it over to Mr. John DeWooten, and I'll be out here.
Good evening. I'm glad to see so many young people here tonight. This is what Tarboro is going to be built on, and the more you have about your past, the better off you're going to be. I'm hoping that you take it from here and research some of Edgecombe County history on your own, through your schoolwork or however it is. I wasn't much of a historian when I got here in North Carolina. I knew very little about North Carolina history, and I guess it was by accident that I joined the Phoenix Historical Society. I can't remember how I got into it, but it's been a joy. You know, we've unveiled about 5 different historical authors, including the Thelonious Monk. When you get old, I hold together. But we've unveiled at least 5 historical markers in the last 4 or 5 years. And we're proud of that, and that's gained us national prominence, because we've collaborated with organizations like the Veterans Museum and the Spalding family and other people. And this organization, although we've been few in members, it's made a big impact on America. So with that, I want to welcome you to our program. And I'm going to bring up Roger Stiff, and he's going to give you a little bit about the Phoenix historical purpose. Right here.
Good evening. I just want to read you a passage in reference to the 36 colored troopers ballot New Market Heights, and then I introduce you to our listeners. Now, of the 36 Edgecombe County natives that enlisted in the 35th, 36th, and 37th U.S. colored troops in New Bern, North Carolina in 1863, originally they were known as the African Brigade. 20 were members of the 36 colored troops, and the African regiments were originally named the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Colored Volunteers, in which they were later reclassified as the 35th, 36th, and 37th Colored Troops. The 36th was one of 6 regiments that made their mark at the Battle of New Market Heights in Virginia in 1864 outside of Richmond. And a recent book reviewer wrote, when asked to name the most important fight in which African Americans participated during the American Civil War, most will likely give the nod to the Battle of Fort Washington, the topic of the famous movie Glory. Most of them would be wrong. On September 29th, 1864, two brigades of Payne's Colored Troop 3rd Division successfully stormed a position which Union troops failed to carry on several previous occasions. 14 Medals of Honor were awarded for that performance, proving that black soldiers would and could fight as well as white men. A Virginia State Historical Marker at the battle site reads, on the 28th of September 1864, elements of Major General Benjamin F. Butler's army crossed the James River to assault the Confederate defenses of Richmond. At dawn on the 29th of September, 6 regiments of U.S. colored troops fought with exceptional valor during their attack along New Market Road. Despite heavy casualties, they succeeded in capturing New Market Heights, north of the road, and of the 16 Medals of Honor awarded to Negro soldiers during the Civil War, 14 were bestowed for this battle. And Butler wrote that capacity of the Negro race for soldiers had then and there been successfully bullied and successfully settled forever. Among the Edgecombe natives in the 36 colored troop were Charles Levenhouse, age 22, of Company E, killed by bullet wounds in the attack on New Market Heights, September 29, 1864. Richard Cherry, age 41, of Company C, died on October 10, 1864 from wounds received during that battle. Edgecombe native Hamilton Pittman, age 28, of Company B, died November 15, 1864, Portsmouth, Virginia, at Belfour U.S. General Hospital, September 29, 1864, New Market Heights, that's where he fought at. These 3 were our Edgecombe marbles. Charles Lappinghouse, basically. Lappinghouse enlisted in the 36th Colored Troop in the town of Washington, North Carolina on April 21st, 1863. Richard Cherry enlisted in Washington on September 7, 1863. Edgecombe native Hamilton Pittman also enlisted on September 15, 1863. This suggests that these 3 may have been among those who fled enslavement in Edgecombe and followed the Tar River to freedom behind Union lines in Washington. There were about 1,000 refugees in the contraband camp in Washington. This also suggests that Lappinghouse, Cherry, and Pittman may have been among those 100 African Americans who were armed by the Union Army that aided in successfully defending the town of Washington, North Carolina from the Confederate siege in March and April of 1863. This year, the Phoenix Historical Society has recognized the 150th anniversary of the African Brigade of the Union Army that was organized in eastern North Carolina in 1863. We salute all the 36 Edgecombe natives that served in the 3 original African Brigade regiments, and especially the 20 who served in the 36 colored troops, and with courage and valor fought in the Battle of New Market Heights. And to the 3 Edgecombe natives that gave their lives for freedom on the battlefield outside of Richmond in 1864. Which brings us to our next guest. He is currently a professor and AIG coordinator at the Lyceum Academy at New Hanover High School in Wilmington, North Carolina. He was most recently an associate professor at Shenandoah University and a historian for the National Park Service. He is the author of the books, The Stable Hero, African Americans in the Fredericksburg Battlefields, the Chancellorsville, also the book, The Chancellorsville Campaign, and the book, The Battle of Fredericksburg, We Can't Escape History. And of course, what brings us here tonight is the 36th Infantry Colored Troops in the Civil War. It is my pleasure and my highest esteem that I introduce to you the orator of these precious moments in history. Ladies and gentlemen, will you please welcome Dr. James K. Bryant.
Thank you so much for welcoming me here. I've come from Wilmington, and I send you greetings from all my colleagues in the Lyceum Academy, and also send you greetings from my own family, the Bryant family, who originated in Brunswick County.
Okay. Huh?
I want to say thank you to all of our veterans who are here today. I want to say to the young folks, continue learning, continue growing. This is going to be important. It is important. I'm very humble because all of you here have done most of the groundwork. Some of you read my book, but my whole point was to continue to get people interested. People already interested about their families role in the American Civil War. They're interested in the general history of their communities. And if I did just a little bit, somebody saw a name that looked familiar for Edgecombe County, then I've done the job. Because all of a sudden, we have whole stories now people are telling, and they're communicating this with me from all across the country. I'll just quickly say there's a gentleman from New York City, and he happened to look on the roster and saw a name that looked familiar, and I said, well, that must be one of our North Carolina natives. Came down with his family, located the plantation where his ancestor lived, got his service records, found out that right before he was getting ready to be whipped, he told his master, you know what, I'm not going to take this anymore. Ran away and joined the Army, I believe, in New Bern, and served throughout the war in the 36 USCT, and he was able to locate the owner's grave. So, I mean, little things like that, and he continues to write up his family history. So little things like that, I always enjoy hearing. I just had that little spark. I'm happy to do that. Because I got interested in these stories. And I got interested in the state of my birth. So, and the role they had in the Civil War. So keep doing what you're doing. I'm your cheerleader. Keep doing what you're doing. Now, I'm going to kind of try to stay on script, stay on time, but I have a habit of digressing and moving around. I'm speaking to two different groups at the same time, having a PowerPoint, so please bear with me. I generally don't have any lavish animation or anything like that, just pictures and photographs. But I definitely wanted to have some graphic depictions of what I'm talking about today. We are talking about the 36th United States Colored Infantry, also known as the 2nd North Carolina Colored Volunteers. And I will spend some time talking about their role at the Battle of New Market Heights. I'll just say a few things about this. Some of you may already know this, that the 36th is recruited in Union-occupied New Bern, and some of the earliest enlistments are in June of 1863, and then on August 29th, they're going to be ordered to Portsmouth, Virginia. They're going to be under the direct command of Colonel Alonzo G. Draper, who I will talk about a little bit later. They're going to be officially put into the service of the United States on October 28, 1863 at Fort Monroe, Virginia. Now, here is the issue that some scholars would have. Well, is the 36th a North Carolina regiment, or is it something else? I just got off the telephone yesterday with a news reporter in Newport News, Virginia, and apparently I'm one of the few people that has any knowledge about USCTs in the southeastern Virginia. And as he was looking through the files, he said, there's a lot of people from Norfolk, Portsmouth, southeastern Virginia. I said, well, I would say about almost 44% claim their place of birth in southeastern Virginia. Slightly 51% would claim North Carolina first. And again, part of that is because the regiment did move when it was still recruiting. So it can have some claim of North Carolina and Virginia. So for those of you who were looking for a purely North Carolina unit, you do have some strong North Carolina connections, obviously. But here's the one thing I want everyone to keep in mind. When we talk about the American Civil War, white Union units, white Confederate units, people, families going to war together, you also see similar things with the 36th United States Colored Troops as well. Families are going to war together. You have brothers going to war together. You have half-brothers. You have uncles and nephews going to war together in this unit. You can track people from the same counties and find out they were owned by the same masters or were owned by owners right down the road. So it is a family affair when we start looking at the 36th United States Colored Troops. I'm going to now talk a little bit about their military history, because they had extensive history. They go from North Carolina to Virginia to Maryland and then back to Virginia. So they've traveled a lot. A lot of these folks that hadn't been outside of their home counties too often now get to see a good deal of the eastern seaboard. When they are mustered into service, they are put into operation in southeastern Virginia, into neighboring Princess Anne County, Virginia, trying to gain contraband, freedmen families, as well as recruits, and also to break up activities by sympathizing Confederate partisan troops. Princess Anne County, Virginia is present-day Virginia Beach now. We already heard about the mentioning of the African Brigade, the Black North Carolina troops. These were organized by a general by the name of Edward Augustus Wild. And he is going to launch members of the 36th USCT, members of the 35th, or 1st North Carolina Colored Volunteers, on a major raid, 2,000 of them, in the northeastern counties of North Carolina. And this is going to be massive. The largest collection of black troops fighting for the Union on a major raid at this point in the war. They're going to be sent to Maryland to be prison guards over Confederate prisoners of war at Point Lookout, Maryland. Probably the earliest instance of black troops doing so. And there are always a couple of instances I've been trying to follow up on of, actually I believe it might be a North Carolina Confederate soldier who spotted one of his former slaves in the 36th. And apparently, I still haven't been able to pinpoint it, but apparently that soldier in the 36th actually gave federal dollars to his former masters just to make his life a little easier. So there are still some bonds there, apparently. They also will conduct raids into Virginia's northern neck region, the area between the Potomac River and the Rappahannock River. And then, of course, they would eventually, by July of 1864, serve in the trenches in front of Petersburg and Richmond as part of General Benjamin F. Butler's Army of the James. And of course, as we all know, they participated in the assault against Newmarket Heights across the Newmarket Road in the attempt to get into Richmond, and they are able to capture works held by some of Robert E. Lee's premier troops, his Texas Brigade, and they're able to capture those works. Here's where Dr. Bryant gets into a little trouble. On the next one, they are one of the first units to enter the abandoned capital at Richmond. Now, there is some controversy over that, but their commander would actually disobey orders and would force the troops through a field to beat white troops heading into Richmond. And so they would get right to the city limits, cross it, and then form up as the white troops pass. So there are some issues with that. And then they are sent to Texas to secure the borders, since Mexico is under a French dictatorship and the possibility of going across the border. So they're part of the Securing the Borders program from June of 1865 to their time of mustering out of service, October 28, 1866. So they have had an extensive and unique history, and I would say comparable, probably more so than some of the other black units that served in the Union Army. So I just wanted to kind of give you a background of the 36. This man is going to be very important. This is Thomas Morris Chester, the only African-American war correspondent writing for a major newspaper. He is writing for Philadelphia's Press. He has attached himself to the Army of the James, commanded by Major General Benjamin Franklin Butler. Butler, by 1864, is insistent on bringing in United States colored troops as part of his command. They will not be laborers. They will not be digging ditches, if he can help it, although I have this photograph, presumably of the 36, back there at the Dutch Captain now. But he wants them in his major operations, and he's very serious about this. And so Thomas Morris Chester is going to attach himself to Butler's troops, and he will spend a lot of time with the 36th United States Colored Infantry, among others. He would write in 1864 that the 36th USCT is a model regiment, and wherever it has operated has been distinguished by the undaunted bravery of the men and the gallantry of its officers. And I'm going to briefly talk about some of its officers. There are some colorful characters here. On the left is their first colonel, Colonel Alonzo Granville Draper. He is going to be from Lynn, Massachusetts. Right before the war, he leads a major shoe strike in Lynn, Massachusetts that got national attention. So he's a labor leader. He's also a temperance advocate. He does not drink. And he's also committed to abolitionism. And he gladly takes command of the 2nd North Carolina Colored Volunteers at New Bern on August 1st, 1863. He had been clamoring to command black troops, but he did not want troops recruited from the free states like the 54th and 55th Massachusetts. He really wanted to encourage the former slaves to fight for their own freedom. And he asked the governor of Massachusetts repeatedly, I want to command a unit of former slaves. And they kind of said, well, we can give you a white unit if you want one. No, I want to command a unit of former slaves. The feeling was that he was pretty strict, and they felt that he might be too harsh on the black soldiers. But his soldiers loved him. His soldiers loved him. He would also command the brigade that the 36th USCT would be a part of, along with the 5th that was recruited in Ohio, and the 38th recruited in Virginia at the assault on New Market Heights. So he gets elevated to higher command responsibilities at New Market Heights. This gentleman on the right is Lieutenant Colonel Benjamin Pratt. He is going to be a fairly wealthy shoe manufacturer before the war. He would serve in a white Massachusetts unit earlier in the war. He would fight the big battles like Antietam, Fredericksburg. And then his unit is sent out west. And apparently when they're in Kentucky, one of their duties that they have to perform, see, Kentucky still has slavery, and that was kind of exempted from Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation. And so one of their unpleasant duties, believe it or not, was that they had to stand as guards at a slave auction in Kentucky. for many of these soldiers, including Pratt, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. So when they began thinking about what their next course of action would be, Pratt and many of the members of his old unit in 35th Massachusetts would decide to get commissions in black units. And he got a commission as the number 2 guy in the 36th. He would actually command the 36th at Newmarket Heights. So these are very important individuals, part of the leadership of the 36th. I'm going to show you a couple of other officers. One that I'm speculating might be of interest to some of you. This is Captain William Hart, who would later command the regiment for the rest of its time in the service. He would command Company H at the Battle of Newmarket Heights, one of the few company commanders that were available, that were not ill or in detached duty during that time period. This young man on the right is Captain George B. Proctor, and I'm going to tell you why I think he's interesting. He serves in 25th Massachusetts Infantry. He is part of an expedition in 1862, commanded by General Ambrose Burnside, to capture important places in eastern North Carolina. He is responsible, he's going to be part of the group that captures New Bern, Washington, Plymouth, and he'll be an enlisted man, he'll be a corporal at the time. Among his duties is that he commands a makeshift, I guess, forerunner of a sapper and miner squad, early demolitions during the Civil War, so fortifications, things like that, Corporal Proctor would be your guy. Now, I did get some information about the story of the siege of Washington, Edgecombe County. Presumably, slaves were armed. You know, it is possible that Corporal Proctor may have been, involved in that. I'm not saying he was, but here's the thing. Proctor will be very familiar with a lot of the freedmen coming into the line, in and around New Bern and Washington, and he would get a commission in the 2nd North Carolina Colored Volunteers, soon to be the 36th. He is responsible for enlisting Charles Lavenhite, Richard Cherry, and Hamilton Pittman, and actually also Joseph Hone, at Washington, into the 36th USCT. And like I said, I can't say for sure, but he might have been familiar with them. So he's an important person. Now he stays in the unit until April 1864, when he submits his resignation and resigns. Part of the reason is he does not get along with Colonel Draper. That's a whole other story. But Proctor seems to have a sense of the soldiers that he's dealing with, particularly those from North Carolina. So that might be somebody you folks might want to look at a little bit closer. Benjamin Butler and the United States Colored Troops. On the right is General Edward Wild, responsible for creating the African Brigade. He's also going to be the former commander of Colonel Pratt, who's the number 2 commander in the 36th. He formerly commanded the 35th Massachusetts. He gets wounded at the Battle of Antietam, but he is recuperating, and President Lincoln appoints him as a brigadier general to recruit former slaves in North Carolina. But the big person that kind of gets things going is this handsome gentleman on the right. Major General Benjamin Franklin Butler, one of Abraham Lincoln's political generals, a Democrat who supports the war effort, a prominent attorney in Massachusetts before the war. He is responsible for getting the federal government to support the bringing in of fugitive slaves. In 1861, he's commanding Fort Monroe, Virginia. 1861. 3 fugitive slaves come in. They basically say, we are slaves of Confederates building fortifications arrayed against Fort Monroe. They're telling us they're going to send our families south. The next day, Confederate officers under flag of truce approach Butler and say, we want the return of our slaves. Butler says, wait a minute, didn't Virginia just leave the Union? You can't get your slaves back. Consider them captured. Contrabands of war, duly captured. What ends up happening is that contraband would be a term to define the status of these fugitive slaves. And the federal government begins enacting legislation throughout until the Emancipation Proclamation. But Butler is going to be sent to New Orleans, where he reactivates black units. He begins to believe that they truly can prove themselves. And he ends up back in southeastern Virginia in 1863. And he now wants to have black units in his command. Below, there's a picture of Wild's raid and some of the black soldiers going through northeastern North Carolina in December of 1853, liberating that part of North Carolina. Above is the sally port of contraband families coming in seeking refuge. Some people call that the Freedom Fort, and others, like Union officers, would call it the flagship of freedom. And so this is kind of the origins of the 36th U.S. Infantry, the 35th, as well as the 37th, originating in North Carolina. Butler would also, before this raid, issue some special orders, basically guaranteeing his black soldiers that if they're wounded, they would get compensation. If they're killed in battle, their wives and children who are in the contraband camps, places like New Bern, Washington, Plymouth, Portsmouth, Norfolk, they would also be taken care of for a number of years for their service. Even if the pay was not equal, he wanted to assure those soldiers that we're looking out for you. A colored soldier fills the same ranks as a white soldier and also fills the same space in a grave. So that was Butler's view by 1863. We already see United States colored troops in action with one of the premier armies fighting in Virginia in the Eastern Theater. That was the Army of the Potomac. And they had a battle of sorts on July 30th, 1864 in front of Petersburg. Sometimes referred to as the Battle of the Mining Crater. The plan was for some soldiers who had been miners in Pennsylvania to basically blow up, dig a tunnel, set explosives under the Confederate line, blow it up, and then to spearhead the attack would be black troops, USCTs, from the Army of the Potomac, because they were fresh, they were full. But at the very last minute, there were some reservations. They might not be able to take the worst. Or, if they fail, then we might be accused of using them as cannon fodder. So at the last minute, the black troops are removed to spearhead that attack. White troops are put in. The attack is a fiasco. Black troops are sent in to reinforce. But, in the end, the ground is given up. Butler did not want that to happen in his Army of the James. That's also in the entrenchments before Richmond and Petersburg. He was serious about making sure I'm not going to pull my troops out. Matter of fact, they're going to spearhead most of my attacks. When he got down on Wilson's Wharf, the first troops on the ground were USCTs. So, he's very serious about this. And now he's got an attempt. After two previous failed attempts by white Union troops to try to take Richmond, he wants to use it with his black troops under the command of General Charles Payne. And Colonel Draper is commanding a brigade that includes the 36th U.S. Colored Infantry. Here is Newmarket Heights. I took it from Noah Andrew Trudeau's Like Men of War, one black troop in the American Civil War. Up to the left, actually, and the main reason why I have this is a letter. And you see this drawing here. It's a letter from Lieutenant John Owen, who is in Company H of the 36th USCT. He's writing to his mother, and he's actually drawing a description of the trenches that they're behind. And he actually, and this is interesting, he writes and saying that I just heard a cow close by. Think of that for the front. And here are two women, wives of the men in the regiment. Some of the soldiers' wives in 36 are out there milking a cow as shells periodically are going by. That had necessitated in following us through shot and shell. Now, not now, but while we were before Petersburg. They do not seem to be afraid, and one is our cook. They employed one of the wives of the soldiers, black soldiers, as their cook. So and you can see the description of the Battle of New Market Heights. The 1st Brigade under Samuel Duncan has probably the worst of it, going through getting hit, trying to remove obstacles in front of the position. They're trying to take the New Market Road. It's actually a double-pronged attack. There's Union troops over to the east as well. And then Draper's Brigade with the 36th would follow up at New Market Heights. And there's going to be heavy shot and shell. As I mentioned before, a lot of the officers, the company commanders, the white company commanders, many of them are either ill, although there's a couple that got to get out of their sick bed to lead their troops into battle. But at least 4 of the companies are led by their black first sergeants. So you've got leadership right there on the ground by black soldiers. They're able to take the position. The Confederates cannot hold the position. And New Market Heights is theirs. Now the question is if the troops to the east can follow up. Chester, Thomas Morris Chester, is observing the 36 USCT before they're making their assault. And he would write, "Every man looked like a soldier, while inflexible determination was depicted upon every countenance. The officers, as they went along the line, were impressed with an unwavering confidence by the martial bearing of the troops. The fears which generally precede the preparation for a desperate conflict soon gave place to hope. And as the eye ran down the line, the unconquerable purpose manifested in the brightened eyes of redeemed freedmen inspired the officers in command with a settled conviction of victory." The 36 would have 2 Medal of Honor winners out of this, among the 14 in this assault. One Medal of Honor winner whose picture is not up here is Corporal Miles James. He got hit by some artillery shrapnel from the Rockbridge artillery on the other side, mutilated his entire right hand. And he's basically loading up his weapon with his good hand, encouraging his men forward in the midst of heavy fire. This man right here is Private James Gardner of Gloucester, Virginia. He is going to be the first man over the parapets, and there's a Confederate officer waving his saber, and he goes after him, bayonet, and then encourages his comrades forward. He's going to be one of those 2 Medal of Honor winners in the 36, along with Corporal James. James Gardner, here's an interesting story about him. After the war, he ends up moving to Ottumwa, Iowa, and he actually converts to Catholicism, and he's getting confirmed, and his priest says, "Well, what is your confirmation name?" And he says, "Well, I haven't thought about it." And the priest says, "I'll tell you what, it'll be Daniel. You'll be James Daniel Gardner, because you did fight, you did overcome your travails in the lion's den throughout your life." So that's where you get James D. Gardner. He has recently, a couple of years ago, had a monument in Gloucester Courthouse, Virginia, a plaque in the courthouse square as being a native of Gloucester, Virginia. One of the unfortunate things about photographs, especially of USCTs, is that I have not found any from North Carolina. And that's the unfortunate thing. And that's where some of you come in. If you look hard enough, that would be great. But there is a rare photograph of a soldier in the 36th United States Colored Infantry. This is Major Meekin from New Kent County, Virginia. He would also be in the 36 USCT's assault on New Market Heights. He's in the uniform of a first sergeant, a top sergeant, but he's going to be a sergeant under First Sergeant Samuel Gilchrist of Company K during that assault. And Sergeant Gilchrist was also a black man leading a company in this assault. And so this is a post-war picture. One of their chaplains had his collection. He was originally from Wisconsin, and the Wisconsin Historical Society has a photograph that was in the chaplain's. He's got several, but photographs in his papers. So this is a rarity to see photographs of units like the 36 of the soldiers themselves. So I'm very pleased to at least share that. But there's going to be a lot of criticism about Newmarket Heights in post-war historical scholarship. There's a lot of prominent scholars, some that I've known and I do respect, who would say Newmarket Heights was nothing. You know, Butler just wasted his energies throwing black troops against a well-entrenched Confederate force. And I would have to disagree. I've always disagreed. One of my good friends, James Price, wrote a recent book, Newmarket Heights, Freedom Will Be Ours by the Sword. He does a great job in explaining how important Newmarket Heights was militarily, and of course, important to the soldiers of the United States colored troops and to a skeptical nation. These troops went up against one of Robert E. Lee's best troops, and they had to give up the ground because they couldn't handle it. That's what I'm telling you. Newmarket Heights, it is true, is going to be the most important victory. Fort Wagner is the 10th assault. It's a great story of bravery. But it's here at Newmarket Heights that you're a little bit closer to Richmond than you were before. That's the important thing to take away from this. Of course, in the aftermath of Newmarket Heights, there are going to be family members looking for wounded brothers, half-brothers, comrades, and that battlefield. And so we do have the sorrowful aftermath. But nevertheless, the 36 USCT will continue on representing the best that was in the African American community under slavery, and also represent the best that the United States had to offer. When I wrote this book, I was not looking for, African Americans that ended up serving in Reconstruction Congresses, things of that nature. These were ordinary folks that had families, concerns. And I kind of looked at this work as a study of the masses. You did not have, prominent politicians coming out of 36 USCT. Most of these folks went back to their homes in southeastern Virginia, eastern North Carolina, tried to rebuild their lives that had been shattered by slavery. There would be a few local folks, people like Richard Etheridge, who actually started an all-black life-saving company on Pea Island that would get notoriety. There's actually a book written by him, written about him, not by him, written about him. And a few others. And of course, the occasional veterans by the turn of the century in their uniform coming out in the commemoration of veterans. But we have to keep in mind, 36 United States Colored Infantry was part of a larger struggle of sacrifice undertaken by African Americans to achieve freedom and equality in the United States. The story of the part taken by the colored soldiers in the war, which resulted in establishing the freedom of this race, wrote a Union Army staff officer in 1864, will at the hands of some future historian form a romantic chapter in the history of the progress of the Republic. And my last slide, I actually should have added one more book, but these are kind of North Carolina books focused on the USCT. Of course, Richard Reed, and the book I mentioned, Richard Etheridge and the Pea Island Lifesavers Farm, beached by two English professors, actually. One other book I probably should have put up there was James S. Price's Newmarket Heights, Freedom Will Be Theirs by the Sword. And again, I will tell you young people, continue to learn your history. Continue to learn. And to our veterans, I say a heartfelt thank you. And thank you.
Good evening. If you note on the program, my name is Clarence Powell. First, I want to give thanks to the Phoenix Historical Society and the Edgecombe County Museum. They allowed me last February to speak on behalf of the Marco Point Marines. I'm a Marco Point Marine which received the Congressional Medal of Appreciation during World War II. And the museum allowed me to speak on behalf of those Marines last year. I give thanks to them tonight, and I also give condolences to them because you have lost one Marine who was very instrumental in this museum here. That was Joe Barnes. So, I come tonight to give reflections. I don't think I can give too much more about the colored troops because Mr. Stitt and Mr. Bryant has already given us ample information on that. But I will give you a little reflection as to why I'm a member of the Phoenix Historical Society. And Brother Luton said he don't really realize how he became a member. I know exactly why I became a member. Because much like the person from New York who found out that he had relatives down with the slave history in North Carolina, I had that same experience. I was always told that my grandfather, who was born in 1851, on a slave plantation in Edgecombe County. His father was the, I guess you would call him the husbandman or the manservant or valet or whatever to the owner of the plantation. Therefore put him outside the purview of the overseer of the slaves. So he had no control of him. Only the owner of the plantation could praise or blame his manservant. So when the owner of the plantation left and the overseer saw he had a chance to get at my great-grandfather, he took that opportunity. And during the ensuing struggle, my great-grandfather escaped. And we were always told that he went to Richmond to join the Union Army. During World War II, and I give honor here too again to all those African American women who sent their sons off to fight in a war where many of the Americans did not really appreciate that service. My mother sent 6 sons to served in the United States military. 4 of us was in harm's way during World War II. I have a brother who was in the Navy, 2 brothers in the Army, and 3 brothers in the Army, and I was in Marines. So I give her honor because I think maybe her prayers brought us all back safely. During that time, in World War II, my grandfather, who had become now a Disciples of Christ minister, he went to the Selective Service Board and told them that his father was Albert Powell, fought in the Civil War. But he told them that he fought on the side of the South because during the Civil War, before the colored troops and all was accepted, some of the Southerners took their slaves to, they didn't give them guns, but they took them there to the army with them. You know, as Mr. Bryant mentioned, that what they did, sometimes they, as Benjamin Butler, expropriated them as contraband because they did the dirty work. You know. So when my great-grandfather wanted to go overseas to be a chaplain to the black troops over there. He told them that his father was in the Confederate Army, not the Union Army. So we were always told that he was in the Union Army, that he escaped and joined the Union Army in Richmond. So when I first met Jim and his wife, and knew that they were doing the African American history of Edgecombe County, and I was just champing at the bit to become a part of it, because I want to set the record straight. Even though, if I find a record, is that if he did serve in the Confederate, it is what it is. But I'm almost certain that he didn't serve in the Confederate Army. He served in the Union Army. And, but tonight, my reflection is supposed to be about the 36th and 35th colored troops. I would like to read you a poem that was written by Joseph T. Wilson. And this is out of the book that Mr. Bryant mentioned about the James C. Price book. And this is the poem that's written by Joseph Wilson, Poetic Lament, first published in 1892. Still remains a tragic reality. Poem goes as such. No marble shaft or granite pile marked the spot where they fell. Their bones lay harvested from the sunlight. In the nation cities of the dead, Hannibal lay. No braver than they that thought Alpine snow nor way. To freedom were grace balances more, who all glory day followed Butler to the New Market Pike. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank everybody for coming out here, and thank the museum for hosting, partying with us again for this event. And thanks so much, Dr. Bryant, coming.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm so glad we were able to locate you. I was trying, because we were trying to first contact Mr. Price. And he told me, well, you 36, this is the man you can get a hold of, but I couldn't quite find you. I thought you were in Winchester, then I found you were in Bloomington. But anyway, God has a way of working, things out. You're here, and it's perfect. Thank you so much. We want to, again, highlight to folks on the program the names that we recovered of the 36 Edgecombe natives who were the 35th, 36th, and 37th U.S. colored troops. And we're so thankful to our member of Benjamin Justice for this research, but it's so important to us that we finally have these names have come out of, been recovered from history. And we know these names, and we know the struggle they were involved in. And today, just this week, we turned the anniversary of Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. And those words can ring true today that we highly resolve that these dead just like Charles Laughinghouse, Richard Cherry, and Hamilton Pittman, will not die in vain. That this nation under God will have a new birth of freedom and govern other people by the people, and for the people, will not perish from this earth. That's what we're talking about. And we're glad to have these names of our Edgecombe soldiers who are part of this. And I'd like to turn it over for a few questions before we close out. I'd like to recognize we have some elected officials here from the county commissioners and from the county school board. Mr. Wiggins, Dr. Johnson. So glad you're here. And this needs to be taught in our schools. And we need the county to recognize these soldiers So we need to find a way to do that, but this is a step. I'd like to open it up for questions. If anybody got any questions, we can take a few minutes for questions with Dr. Bryant.
Sure, yes, ma'am.
Dr. Bryant, I'll start with a question for, and hope the children can hear. How long did you do this research to get to the production of your book?
Probably when I was 12 or 13. I'll tell you how long ago that was, but no, I have always been interested in the Civil War, and my father one time gave me a book that was published in 1965, Civil War in North Carolina, and I started reading about Wild's Brigade, African Brigade, and years later, fast forward, I'm working in the National Park Service in Fredericksburg, Virginia, fresh out of college. And I started working on a project. There's 5 United States colored troops buried in the graves, and I discovered that one was from the 36 USCT, and he had an interesting background. But then I found out that he got killed on the Northern Neck while stationed in Maryland, and I'm trying to figure out how he ended up in this cemetery in Fredericksburg. And then I also found out that, wait a minute, the 36 was also the 2nd North Carolina Couple Volunteers that was on Wild's grave. Wait a minute, now how did they get from North Carolina? So it started from there. And then finding out about this particular soldier, Peter Wilson, and his background as a slave, and how he joined the 36 USCT, and the voices from other people connected with him. Because he gets killed, but there's other voices, other former slaves, former masters, former descendants of the masters, and things of that nature. So that got me interested. And then I started getting concerned not just about the military aspect, but also the family. Because a lot of these folks are bringing their families to New Bern, to Washington. These slaves are making group decisions. This is not Frederick Douglass in 1838 deciding, I'm a young man, I'm getting ready to escape, to freedom by myself. No, there's whole families sitting down saying, okay, Union Army is nearby. Is this the time for us to go? Or should we stick around? No, we need to go. And I mean, there's mom, dad, grandma, the little babies. They're going across the river to where the Union Army is located. So they're making group decisions at this time. And some of the men later on decide to enlist. So that's how that's got me interested in all of this.
As I sit here, I couldn't help but reflect. I'm looking at, we've got lost, and we don't know the bridge that brought us over, and you bring a lot of good information, and to me it's not Afro information, it's history.
Yes.
And I think really when you separate it, I like the way you presented it, and I'm just wondering, I'm sitting here as an educator, I'm wondering, how do we get this, because you can't know where you're going if you don't know where you come from. You brought a lot of things to light tonight, and I'm sitting here wondering how in the world, because history is not something, we walk away from history. You do a good job of presenting it, and I think you present it in a manner that young folks can understand it. But my question is, how do we get this out in a much wider span?
You continue to do what I'm so happy that you've been doing. You've been doing a lot of the legwork. You've been finding the names. You've been finding connections. You found people like me, and I'm trying to help with connections that I might possibly see. We also, are teachers. I'm a teacher. I've been a teacher at different levels, and I continue to incorporate that into my classes. Everybody's involved in this, not just one particular group of people. You continue to have events such as this. You have events as you find out information from your families. You get together in groups and you share that information and you publicize it and you develop different events that people, maybe a little display. I mean, kids can do a display on their family history and things of that nature. All across the board. We were talking earlier about your granddaughter. There's black and white, and there's Hispanic, Peru. I mean, there's a whole different cultures. Kids tend to play with each other because they're kids, regardless of their background. And I think the same thing has to happen, and you have to continue to be persistent about that. It's hard but we still need to keep doing that. So I would say keep doing the continuing things you've been doing and continue to bring more information. Keep finding ways to get it out there. I've always enjoyed talking with young people. I've always, if anybody invites me to a school, I'll come to the school. I'll try to clear the schedule, I'll come to the school,
Got another question.
you know.
How do we get, you know, there was a time when the military was how, especially Afro-Americans first started to move up. And we walked away. What kind of ideas do you have on getting young folks to really realize that the military is still a good ticket? Because we've gotten, that's one of the things that I'm looking, kids, I'm gonna do what somebody say, what would be your advice to encourage young folks to see that there is a real good opportunity in the military?
There's honor in service. There is honor in service. I almost went to that first Gulf War. I'm the son of a retired Lieutenant Colonel Vietnam. My father-in-law passed away a couple of years ago, Korean War vet. I got two great granduncles, World War II vets. I've got two aunts who are vets of the U.S. Army. So that has always been a part of my family. I think I mean, coming into this museum, there's just so many faces. Men, women, black, white, all the services. That's history. This is the history of the county, and they've all served in some capacity. And I think you have to keep promoting this idea that there's honor in that service. Look what has been gained. This is why you still need to learn the history. Look what has been gained. These former slaves, one minute, next thing you know, they're doing things, going places they've never even dreamed of before. And they're building up the honor and respect of a skeptical nation who wants to keep them down. And they're proving time and time again that they're worthy of being called citizens. We have to keep talking about that. We have to keep promoting that. That this is, yes, all of our history. It's not black history, it's not African American, it's not white history. This is all of our history. We were all a part of this to get to where we are right now. We're at a time where our country, this idea of liberty and freedom, it could have all fallen apart in the 1860s, but it didn't. You know? And we still, it's a constant battle, it's a constant struggle. But we think it's worthy, and we've got to instill in our young people that it's worthy. You know, that there is honor in service. That these were things that people before us give us this opportunity to sit here and peacefully discuss history and things of that nature. You know, there are veterans here today, as we know, who have made great sacrifices. And of course, mothers who gave great sacrifices as well, letting their sons and daughters protect freedoms that we always have to remember. That, you know, they were hard earned and hard fought. So the young people have to understand that. And I will keep mentioning that.
Now, you told that interesting little tidbit of information about the soldier, the slave who encountered the former slave holders.
Yeah, that is a story that comes up in various accounts, both in some Confederate accounts, but also in Union accounts, when at the time the 36th was at Point Lookout, Maryland, as prison of war guards. I do believe it's a member, at least it's been consistent, but they don't say who it was and who was involved. And so I'm kind, you know, it's a daunting task. It's probably one of those things that I'll probably figure it out in about another 20 years. But, you know, I'm kind of looking at, okay, is there any connections I can make with people who served, you know, of the 36, and then they have owners who were in Confederate units, and then kind of think, okay, who got captured? You know, I'm kind of doing that on the side. But that's been a very, very long process. But the story is consistent. It's very consistent by various accounts.
It's interesting because it's almost a little part where there's some civility
There
in
is.
Civil War, because war can't be civil.
Right.
But that's a civility story of war.
When I teach the Civil War and I talk about the slaves, the freedmen, the contraband, I do say that one of the things that you also have to keep in mind, we're talking about human relations. There is a sense of obligation in the South, and even people of color also instill that sense of obligation. Whether they like their situation or not, there's going to be a sense of obligation. These are still my people to a certain extent. In some ways, they grew up with these people, they live together, they know them. You know, what's out there? They keep saying freedom, but I haven't seen it, you know, those kinds of things. And in some cases, genetically, they're connected too. I'm a product of that. My family was Brunswick County slaves. I think my great-great-great-grandfather's father was his owner. So, you know, that's the family story. But nevertheless, there was civility, there were connections. And here is potentially a former slave now in an authority figure. This is different. That turns the whole thing on its head. And he sees as a former master in bad circumstances. I'll give you a few dollars so you can buy, you know, a little extra food or something to make your life a little bit better. You know. I mean, we're still talking about human beings.
That's very, very.
That's a noble story.
Okay, we certainly, I want to thank Dr.
Thank you for
Bryant
your questions. I really appreciate it. I love question and answers.
responding to our request and making this event happen, because we've been talking about this for quite a while, but didn't know we could have the pieces together. And it's, thank you all for coming out. And it's been a wonderful presentation.
Well, thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it.
Exceeded our expectations. It really was. And we really want to work with you closer. Yes, sir. We really do. This is just the beginning for us. We have to work closer. We've got a lot to learn from you and not just together to recover, record, and promote this history. And thank everybody for coming out.
James, one more
Yes,
question.
go ahead.
Where can you buy this book?
You can probably go on Amazon.com. That's probably the easiest way. If you got Kindles, I'd probably say Kindle's a little bit.
This is,
I'm gonna look. Okay. See, that tells you how much I'm involved in that process.
we didn't really order books for this event, but I do have. If you want to let me know tonight, I can order this book tomorrow at the same discounted price that we get for this event. If you're interested in getting, everyone wants a book, to buy a book. Okay, I can. I'm going to order it for you.
But if you can't order,
McFarland Press. McFarland Press. I only work for McFarland Press is in Jefferson, North Carolina, in the mountains.
I'll give up mine if he wants it that bad. Then I'll take one that's ordered.
You gave me a book? $32. That's a discount. Anything else? Anything? Yeah, it's fine, it's fine. Well, I'm saying, the book costs $45. I can get them at a discount, but I need to call them back tomorrow if you want to, we get a special discount for it. And we need to order a lot of books, but I can, you got one. If anyone wants one for about $32, that's a discount off the regular price. There's one thing else, I don't have your phone number with me, but the Foreign Press in Jefferson, North Carolina is publishing. And I don't have their phone number. But I can help facilitate that. Okay. Anything else? If not, we're going to close it out. Thank you much for coming.
Thank you again. Everyone safe journey back to your homes.
Thank you very much.